Welcome to the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Join us each week as we sit down with the founder of Alchemy Wealth Management and author of Your Fiscal Physical, Ryan Nelson. Tune in to gain valuable insights and practical tips as we simplify complex financial concepts into digestible lessons. From budgeting to retirement planning, this podcast is your go-to resource for mastering financial literacy.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the Fiscal Physical Podcast. I am joined by the published author, Ryan Nelson, and the founder of Alchemy Wealth Management. Ryan, how are you? How are things? How's life?
I'm doing really well. Life is great. What about you?
You know, not too bad, man. We're cruising along through this year, and we really appreciate all the listeners out there. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule, man, to record these and to share that out to the listeners. I know it's really appreciated every time I talk to some of our listeners like that. Thank you, guys. Like, some of these topics that you're covering are pretty important. So I think that there's been a rousing success, or at least some positivity coming from it. And I won't share the negative comments because we don't have enough time. So, but today, Ryan, let's kick it off here. This is kind of going to be more of a personal conversation just with you and like just figuring out this. But your history is well documented on this. You got your degree in mechanical engineering, practiced engineering for a while, and then went back to get your MBA, and then swapped over to personal finance at that point. So, you worked with a financial firm, Edward Jones, before this, and then you started Alchemy Wealth Management. Very impressive. So you've obviously seen some things about how to get into finance and how maybe some tips and tricks on what not to do, maybe what to do. So if somebody's interested, maybe we've piqued their interest by this podcast and they want to potentially get into the financial industry, what would you recommend for people?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say that, it's talking financial planning specifically, since that's the industry I'm in.
Definitely.
I would say, it's a great career. One thing I will say, and I might say it again multiple times, like I've told probably everybody who's ever asked me about becoming a financial advisor, it's a great career. It's a terrible job. And what I mean by that, when I say that, is, if you're willing to sort of dedicate yourself to it and do it for multiple decades, it's a fantastic long-term career. If you want to use it as like a stepping stone and do it for 2 years, it's probably like not that awesome.
Right. Yeah.
And so one of the things with this career is it's pretty hard, like at the beginning, and like you don't have any clients, and it can be a real grind and really brutal and really challenging industry to break in to. And so if you only do it for like a year, you get all of the hard parts and none of the nice parts of the long-term success, right? Now, if you're willing to if you're the type of person who likes grinding through those things and you're willing to stick it out and stay in for, multiple decades, then the first few years might be a grind. But it really becomes a really, really fantastic career long-term. So again, if it's something you're interested in just doing for a year or two as a bridge, I don't know, maybe find something else. If it's something you're actually looking at doing for long-term, it's a fantastic, fantastic career. And there's an incredible amount of demand. So they call it the Great Wealth Transfer. And it's sort of like going on right now, so to speak. And they estimate about $84 trillion will transfer from the silent generation and baby boomers to millennials and Gen X.
Wow.
Yep. So about $84 trillion basically is currently being slowly starting to move from one generation to the next. And there's a lot of advisors who are sort of part of that same baby boomer generation who are aging out as well. So the need for financial advisors is just getting greater, and there's this huge transfer of wealth. And so, there's a huge demand for it. The financial environment is just getting more and more complicated. So there's like increased complexity, which creates more of a need for financial advisors.
Definitely.
And it is like impactful work, right? You're actually making like actual changes in people's lives. I think that, again, I mentioned a few episodes back, right? What's the song? Money doesn't buy happiness, but it buys you a boat, right? And again, it's funny, but the reality is like, it also puts food on the table. It puts a roof over your head. Like there's a lot of like standards you need, quote unquote need, like most of us would perceive as a need, that finances are required for, right? It helps you like stay physically healthy and mentally healthy. And so the finances are an important part of everybody's life. And you can work with people to enhance their financial well-being, which again, then trickles down to their physical well-being and their mental well-being. And so you actually do impactful work that changes people's lives to some degree. So yeah, great career. What I would say is one thing that I think is a big misunderstanding is it's like not just about the numbers.
Right.
So I talked to a lot of people, and I think when I first went into the industry, I was a bit sort of ignorant about sort of what the career was actually like and stuff as well. And so it's really a people person business. Mm-hmm. So you're working with I always tell my clients, my job is to be an expert in my clients. I spend time with my clients. My time is entirely spent like with people. There's a lot less of the sort of math side of it. There are like analysts and stuff who do focus on that side of it. But as a financial advisor itself, it really is more of a sort of people business.
Yeah. And it's a good piece to kind of touch on, because I think of you as like, when I first met you, big numbers guy. Like I feel like, and I still think you are
absolutely
specifically in that, but just the evolution of who you've become as like a more of a people person,
sure,
like has been incredible to see just over the last, 11 plus years or whatever it has been. And it's been great to see. But I remember you when you were starting out and like going and door knocking and like
absolutely.
just grinding, like did it you're like, oh yeah, I've hit all the houses in the McCarran circle here.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? And like I was like, how many do you actually get? You're like, I had a lot of door shuts and a lot of people not interested, and then every once in a while you get somebody.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh wow, like to see where you're at now versus where you kind of started it's very interesting. But being a people person I always talk to people are like, who are in sales, they're like, they say they're not in sales, they're in the people business.
Yeah,
that's what it ends up
sure,
kind of being. So I think it's similar. Obviously, you're not selling that specifically, but you are selling, what you're bringing to the table and the service that you're bringing to these individuals.
Everything is a sales business to some degree, right?
That's a good point. Yeah,
but yeah, so definitely, it's a grind for sure. I don't miss knocking on those doors.
Sure.
Thousands and thousands of doors.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'd say, if you're kind of considering a career in finance, for financial advice at least, think about it. I would say, like, if you're to be a good fit, you probably want a high level of emotional intelligence, trustworthiness, and communication skills, are probably some of the kind of table stakes things that you're going to want to have a successful career. And then again, just acknowledge, I touched on this earlier, but acknowledge that it's going to take time to build a client base. And so prepare for a longer like ramp up period. So again, it's a great career, but a terrible short-term job probably. And then also just, I've got to acknowledge that compliance and regulation are a part of the job. So it is a highly, highly regulated industry. I think it and healthcare are the two most regulated industries as far as I'm aware. And so there's a large piece of the job that is just compliance related. And, it is what it is. So you might as well embrace it and, do what's best for your clients.
And I think that's a big piece that, the idea of like being a financial planning or something like this, not only are people just think, oh, it's a numbers thing, but I know specifically just from working with you as my financial planner, like the amount of paperwork I'm sure that just has to get done. Like, and you're just like, okay, cool. Like when things change, like a new presidential elect gets done, or there's a new law passed, a new bill or something that goes through. Like, okay, you have to be thinking about, okay, how does that affect what I have to do with all my clients' money, and that we make sure we stay compliant and ensure that we're on the up and up, because it is, like you said, a very highly regulated industry, which is good. I think it is.
100%. Yeah.
But I also think that that's one of the reasons I'm personally glad that I have a financial planner to do this kind of things, because I was like, oh man, everyone could manage their own finances without a doubt, and they should, and to some degree, but to be able to have somebody who does that stuff that I'm really not interested in, like, thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
that's funny. But yeah, so a couple of quick tips. So what I would say is, like, if you're like, okay, yeah, that all sounds great. Like, I think I'd like a career as like a financial planner. Some of my tips would be like, focus on learning, not earning. So, gain those experiences and build relationships and like refine your process. Learn from mentors, go to conferences, like just, I've read a lot of books, listen to a lot of podcasts, right? So focus on learning, again, not earning. I think some people get in the industry, get a little too caught up in the earning on the front end. And that's usually not good for anybody. It's not good for the clients. It's not good for them. It's not good for anything. Like if you just take some time, allow yourself that ramp up period, learn as much as you can. You'll put yourself in a better position to be successful, and you'll put your clients in a better place to be successful. And then again, be willing to grind. You got to do that cold calling, the networking, like weekends on, meetings on weekends and stuff. And the nice thing is, like, I don't do that anymore, right?
Yeah.
So you can get to a point where you don't have to do that. But when you're starting from scratch, like it is a grind. So you got to sort of acknowledge that. And if that doesn't sound like it would fit into your lifestyle at this point in time, perfect. No harm, no foul. But this may not be the best fit for you. And then I also would recommend building systems. So when I was doing engineering, I was like a lot of what I did was process engineering and systems and stuff. So this is more kind of, maybe just my personal bias on this. But there's a lot of processes in place, right? Like as you're onboarding clients, there's a lot of steps to that. There's a lot of documents that need to be completed. There's a lot of things, and it's really easy for any one of those pieces to get missed if you don't have systems. Mm-hmm. So having systems, documenting the systems, it will allow you to sort of scale and provide a better level of service to your clients. Again, and maybe that's just my engineering background, like peeking in, right? But either way, I think like building those systems like earlier on in your career can be extremely valuable and sort of pay dividends as you start to scale.
Yeah, makes just out of curiosity, like you mentioned, like being a process engineer and in these certain things. Something just not really related, so I apologize that we're diluting here or diverting. But have you ever heard of Frederick Winslow Taylor?
I don't believe I have.
Okay, I'll just we'll talk about that later then. But cool. he came up
with
real
like teaser.
A real teaser. Yeah, but he was a big systems. He came up with like the standard operating procedures and processes to like I think it was the steel business originally. I was just curious if you ever. Cool. But I highly recommend if the listeners check into it. He big process guy and like improvements and like coming up with these like certain things to really change the way manufacturing in the United States and worldwide was done. But I just thought about processing. So we'll go ahead and cut this piece out. But we won't. I mean, it's fun stuff here. But cool. Yeah, build systems early.
Cool.
That stuff. Yeah. Carry on.
So I mean, basically, in summary, I'd say anybody could go into finance, right? You don't need a degree in finance. You don't need to. Any background can be perfect. There's lots of like retired teachers who, somebody who taught, who goes into finance, who become very successful because again, they can communicate complex concepts in a digestible way. So any background is great. You just got to be willing to learn and help others. I'd say be patient again. This is a career that builds over time. You're probably wise to educate yourself. So find a mentor, stay curious, listen to the podcasts, read the books, just stay humble. And then probably the single most important thing is like be that advisor that you'd want to work with, right?
Definitely.
Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of advisors out there who they would not put their own money with that type of themselves almost, right? So, I think it's that kind of thing that's like just so incredibly simple. Like what's the golden rule? Do unto others as you'd want them to do unto you or whatever.
Exactly.
Like same thing, like be the financial advisor you would want. And guess what? A lot of people will want you. Yes. And like, even if that means making a less money in the short term, it's probably even better for you in the long term as well. Right. Yep. Like, so if you're the advisor that other people want to work with, again, don't be, I mentioned earlier, don't focus on the earnings, focus on the learnings. Same thing, like just do what's right. And I think a lot of people will gravitate towards that.
Yep. I think that's a very solid thing. There's a reason why it's called the golden rule because you can apply that to a lot of things too. But you hit on one piece and I'd be remiss if I didn't touch back on it. But so to be a financial planner, do you have to have a degree? Is it like required? I don't really know kind of how that works. I'm sure there's specific things it's required.
Yeah,
for,
there's I don't want to misspeak because things have changed. You certainly didn't need a degree at one point. The licensing requirements have changed since I got licensed. When you say degree, do you mean college or high school?
Yeah, college degree. College degree.
Yeah, definitely at one point you did not need a college degree. I'm not sure with the change in licensing if they've changed that and you do need one. There's certainly some certificates that do require degrees. So I don't entirely know.
I was just curious. I would assume definitely the certifications for sure. Like I remember, one of my other friends got certified a while ago, and he was like, he's like going through all these different things. But I always kind of figured it was maybe a requirement. I mean, a lot of times, like nowadays, you apply for a job and it asks for a college degree or relevant experience is kind of what it goes through. So I'd be curious. Like, I obviously don't want to give.
And that's one of those things where, I mean, by the time I went into the industry, I had a master's degree already. So if it was a requirement, it was just kind of like out of sight, out of mind. I didn't really care so much. So
I'm looking at that degree right now on your wall.
There you go. Yeah. Good looking degree.
It is 2 of them. But awesome. Well, anything else you want to touch on here, Ryan? You think we covered it pretty well? I think you did too.
I think that's great,
man. So awesome. Everybody hang tight here. We'll be right back for the personal section.
And now, to put the personal in personal finance.
Welcome back, everybody. This side of the Fiscal Physical podcast. Still here with Mr. Ryan Nelson. So, Ryan, we're going to get into the hypotheticals here with this question because I love those things. So, are you ready?
Let's do it.
Okay. So, here's my question to you: if you could relive one historical moment as a spectator, what would it be? And by a spectator, I either mean you were at the event or alive when the event was taking place. What would you say this would be?
Yeah, I think it would be cool to have been alive for the landing on the moon. I just think it's like a huge event, like for mankind, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, I think is what.
I think that would have been maybe a fun like event to witness. And I know you said just being alive, but man, what if you were actually there?
Sure. Yeah.
That'd be even cool.
Yeah.
Be the first person to walk on the moon. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's probably tons of these. None are jumping out, but I think witnessing the landing of the moon could have been really fun. What about you?
Yeah, it's funny when I wrote this question, and I also was gonna say the moon landing. That was my first one because it was just such a monumental thing, and my dad was 20. How old was he? When did we land in the 1960 something? He was like 16 or 17 at the time. He's kind of an older guy, and he remembers where he was still.
Sure.
Like when they landed on the move, he was like, "Oh, we were driving to this lake, and we were listening on the radio."
That's awesome.
And there was like a play-by-play of and here comes Neil down the ladder kind of thing. And he's like. And he says it's burned into his brain.
That's so cool.
60 years later, he remembers that specifically. So how important and how big that is, I think it's just absolutely. That was immediately my first thing. But my other thing that I was thinking, I think would be super cool is I like golf. I like watching golf, and I think that growing up, I was a big Tiger Woods fan, and I would love to have gone back to 1997 when he was 22 years old and he won his first major at the Masters at Augusta.
Okay,
and so he won the tournament at 22 years old, blew the field away, won by 10 strokes.
Wow,
and he was just this young African-American guy who was just brash and celebrated everything, and the golf world didn't really know what they were getting, and there was going to be a period of about 10 years that was just pure dominance after him, but that was where he really started. So as a historical and a sports guy, I think going back and watching that event, I think that would be cool, seeing people talk about we saw that we were going to witness greatness on the golf course.
That would be fun.
So something like that. I think back on maybe the first Super Bowl or something like that, and I'm that'd be kind of cool to see. So I think there's so many events that I would like to have seen or experienced, but it's hard to pick just one here. For sure.
Super hard.
Cool. Awesome, Ryan. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody out there, to our listeners. Please check us out wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it might be. Rate, subscribe, listen, download, set your calendars to Tuesday morning when these podcasts drop. And Ryan, I'll leave you to end us here.
As always, stay the course.
Thank you for joining us for the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Until next time, happy listening. And as always, stay the course. If you have a question or topic suggestions, please email us at podcast@alchemywealth.com. If you enjoyed today's discussion, subscribe to the podcast to ensure you never miss an episode, and consider leaving us a rating and review on your favorite platform. This helps other listeners like you find the show. For more resources, you can visit Alchemy Wealth Management's website at www.alchemywealth.com or find your Fiscal Physical, the book, on Amazon. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention that personal finance is just that, personal. Please don't take anything we say as advice. The preceding content is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It's not an offer or a solicitation, nor should it be construed or relied upon for tax, legal, or investment advice. It doesn't consider your personal financial situation or objectives and may not be suitable for you.